Is what do we do with it now? We need to bake some stuff. Probably some maps. So, how many people here have downloaded and installed xNormal? Okay, so that should be done. I sent out a few messages on the Canvas and also Facebook. All I'm going to do is double click on my xNormal and it opens up and looks like this. So xNormal's got an interface from like the 90s, right? Hasn't, I don't think it's changed at all. xNormal is a free software and it also acts as a plug-in within Photoshop.
The FBX you were talking about, when I tried to open it, it said file type not recognized.
Yeah, you can't open an FBX,
okay.
You need to import it.
I was trying to import it and just...
Turn on the plugin. FBX plugin.
Yeah, so you check to make sure the plugin is loaded just like the OBJ plugin so it recognizes it. So xNormal is, in a way, still the industry standard when it comes to baking maps. There are other software packages out there. Tons of AAA studios still use xNormal. It's still free. We still use it at work all the time. Probably a lot of your favorite games people use xNormal on. It's really, in my opinion, it's really, really great. We use other software too, specifically for characters for baking. So there's other baking software. It's a little bit better for like organics and characters, like
like randomized normal to it.
no, it's just it gives you essentially better ambient occlusion maps for characters, where you can do self shadowing. So for characters, we generally use a program for baking called TopoGun. Pretty easy to. Huh?
It sounds impressive.
Yeah.
Preferences.
And it has a little bit better, obviously, I mean, it's a software that costs money. It has a more attractive interface than this.
OBJ export.
But
you need to check both.
this works just fine. So xNormal is super, super easy to use, but there's still, if you something you want to dive into, there's a lot of depth and cool little tricks and other things you can do if you want to get into it. As I've mentioned before, on Polycount, there is a whole sticky thread dedicated to xNormal. Okay, so if you're having troubles with baking in xNormal, you should post a question there if you're not able to get help during TA hours. Okay, generally speaking, somebody will answer it fairly quickly. Okay. So the reason why xNormal is so easy to use is literally, what do we want to do? We want to generate our maps. But the thing is you kind of have to go in order. You need to do each one of these steps before you get to here. Okay? So even if you've never used this before, you can probably guess that step one is to start at the top. Okay? I think that looks like a good place to start. So I'm going to click high definition maps. Anybody have a wild guess what goes here? High def meshes. What should I put here?
Low poly.
Low poly mesh? Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yeah. I should probably put my vehicle in here, right?
Yeah.
No, your barrel.
My barrel, right? And my snowman.
Snowman. People have that.
Okay. So high def mesh. Okay, so this is where that goes. So to add that, all you do is just right click. You can probably do it anywhere. Usually I right click right here, add mesh, and I'm going to find the mesh that I want.
Lit high.
Yeah, but that was
too easy.
I've got to find the ones that we did for here. So I'm going to start with the lid. I'm going to go lid, high, open. And if you scrub across to the right, you'll get some options. Don't check this. We don't need anything from there. This is something you could check if your high poly also had a bump map or a normal map attached to it and you wanted to bake even that additional detail into it. So some micro detail. It would take both. Your scaling of the mesh, you're probably alright at 1. If xNormal over says, hey, you know what, you probably need to have this thing be a little bit bigger if you want to get a good bake. You can scale your meshes in here so they're large enough to get good bakes. That doesn't actually change the scale of your mesh in Maya. It's just scaling it in here prior to baking. So a lot of people, when they'll bring them in, they'll always scale their mesh to like by 10, to 10, just so they're large enough. I've already tried this. I already know ours is fine. And then you don't want to touch anything on here. Keep this all the same. Smoothing normals are fine. Okay, so that's everything on the high. It's pretty simple. You just basically put it in. You're good. Next step, we need a low poly model that we're going to bake too. So click on low definition. I'm now going to right click and say add mesh, and I'm going to pick the appropriate mesh. We have a low poly lid. I'm going to open it. Now I'm going to scrub over. You'll notice that these numbers are the same. You have the option now to click a cage. What a cage is essentially it's taking, you can create your own cage, but it's basically, if you don't import your own cage, a cage is, it's taking the low poly mesh, it's duplicating that, and then you have the option to kind of explode it or inflate it. Inflate it would be a better description. So it inflates it out and pushes it out a little bit so it encompasses the whole mesh. And that way it's projecting based on the position of the cage. That should always be used when you're doing anything organic, especially characters. Also, when you're doing a cage, if you're going to use a cage option, you're not going to get very good results unless your model is watertight. So on our low poly models, unless you did yours differently, they're not watertight. Like the battery pack and the hinges, they're just kind of shoved up against the thing, or maybe part of it's impeding, maybe part of the hinge is actually impeding part of the bottom mesh. Watertight means that all the vertices and all the edges connect to a vertice. It's hollow in the inside and everything's snug, right? If it's not the case, when you go to inflate it, if vertices aren't connected together, they kind of get all crazy, okay? But that's where you do, and you can enable that option. A batch protection is when you're batch rendering files or doing multiples of a file. Typically all these aren't batch, and I always check it because apparently it does give you better results even if you're not doing a batch bake. I think it probably just stems from the idea that once upon a time somebody baking out a map all of a sudden clicked it and said, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden it fixed X problem, but couldn't associate, did it really fix the problem, right? Probably had nothing to do with it. So it might just be one of those associations, but most people agree that having batch protection checked leads to better results. So it's not going to do anything bad, just check it. This is where you can load an external cage, right click, browse external cage. We're not going to do that. Okay?
I still know what a cage is.
I just explained that. So if you're interested in learning more about cages and how to bake with the cage, there's a whole thread on PolyCount and tons more information online that you can explore. Okay? So here, smooth normals, we have options here. We can use exported normals, average normals, hardened normals. What should we use?
Hardened normals. Average normals. The default.
I think the default's a good call here. Okay? If we change those, it's basically going to override the information that we've put into the model. So we spent all that time designating the hard edge and the soft edges, or setting, essentially we're telling it how the normals of the faces to act. And if we check on any of these, it's going to override any of that information that we designated on our mesh. Okay? Which we don't want to do.
So when do you want to do that?
So don't even touch it. Just leave it like that. But there's that option there if you want to.
They're there.
Huh?
It's gotta be a reason they're there.
Yeah, there is. You can override it if you want. I would leave it like this.
Would you smooth the high poly though?
It doesn't matter, and you can leave it as is. We've added so much of geo, it's not even registering a hard or soft edge. It's just pure geo.